And today we're talking about helping children with dysregulated behavior. And then we're talking about children of all ages. We're not just talking
Mhm.
about little kids. We're really talking about, how can we help our children, teens, even adults with self-regulation? And because boy, when our kids are dysregulated, so are we, and we need as much support as we can to calm our own nervous system. So let's talk about some of the different forms of self-regulation and some simple strategies as they're not so simple. They are time tested, they work, and I mean they're simple, they're hard to do consistently. But when you do address behaviors, emotions, sensory issues, cognitive, whatever's going on with consistency, your child is very capable of learning, right? So let's talk about behavioral self regulation because I feel like that's on the top of the pyramid. And it's sort of where, we know that there's behavioral disinhibition and inability to control behavioral responses, learning, attention, thinking, doing, and I'm going to put in healing can occur because your nervous system's just going to be too dysregulated for any of those things to occur in any kind of effective way. And in some cases, when you're in that sympathetic dominance, right? You're a brain on fire, your limbic system's in overdrive, you're in a hyper state, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same things. You're in a sympathetic dominant fight, flight, or freeze response. Nothing is capable. You're in survival mode. And many of our kids with OCD, anxiety, mood disorder, even your nice little LD kid can move in this direction when their needs aren't being met, when stress is too high, which is surprising. And a lot of times, these, extreme issues or very complex issues, they sort of creep in, right? And you only can make sense out of them when you go back and connect the dots. So, when it comes to behavioral self regulation, the number one thing parents can do, and I think this is the hardest, is modeling self regulation. So, when we model what we want from our kids, guess what? They're a lot more likely to do it, right? So, we can either meet our kids with their anger, with our anger. We can meet our kids with their anxiety, with our anxiety. But when we're 80% or better, right? Remember, imperfect parenting, we're doing a good job. We are modeling what we want to see. You can't yell at your kid and be like, hey, stop yelling. I mean, unless you're in the middle of the airport and the TSA is looking at you. But you can't on the regular. What is your kid going to learn? They're not going to learn something. So we have to show them. And, as you're understanding the five types of self regulation, understanding how kids learn, these are all pieces to the puzzle that is your beautiful child of whatever age. Then we have to understand that everything's connected. And learning doesn't just happen. So your kid can be very intelligent. Maybe most people, 70% of the population have an average IQ. And, so most kids have a normal intellect. And what we can do is we can teach them, right? So let's focus on what we want to teach them. And so my next tip is reinforcing desired behaviors. So behaviorism 101, right? Like, it doesn't matter if it's an animal or a human, we have to shape the behaviors we want. So, in that same example of screaming at your kid and telling them not to yell, we're not only modeling the wrong behavior, we're actually reinforcing the wrong behavior. So, what we'd want to do, right, is like, let's say they attempted to pull their voice down. Thank you for catching yourself, Becky. I know that must have not been easy. That's great. What do you how did you do that? Now they might be too dysregulated. Don't ask a lot of questions when they're dysregulated. But later go back and be like, "Hey, you were so great. You were using your quiet voice. What was different about today?" And they might say, "I don't know." And you're going to be like, "Well, I think maybe this and this." And it was fantastic. I look forward to doing that tomorrow. So much more of a pleasant conversation. And as I always say, these things are an investment upfront that pays off big time because you're not going to have fact fighting and arguing and all those things. You're really going to move to a different place where there's self regulating, right? This is a self-regulation series. How do we build it? Okay, let's talk about emotional self-regulation. So when we have a kid that is dysregulated with emotions, so maybe they have big emotions or avoidant emotions, right? What we always want to do is validate, right? We're validating, not accommodating. And so let me give you an example of validating, right? So we don't want to over comfort somebody. Oh, the moment they're in distress, right? I had somebody who, they were super worried about me and my staff in our program and how we were going to interact with them and their daughter was easily distressed, would easily, go into an overactive, angry state, and also had a lot of avoidant behaviors too. And I was like, hold on. We got this, Jessica, you know? And what happens is they were accommodating, their whole family was set up to meet the needs of their daughter and so that the daughter wouldn't get anxious and their daughter wouldn't get angry, right? And instead, they were like feeding this barking dog, right? So validating would be like, wow, sounds like this is hard for you, right? That's a validating. We're not encouraging, we're not overcomforting, but then not accommodating it, be like, wow, sounds like it was hard for you. But you seem to have got through it today. Wonder what was different, right? And so we're cueing the brain to pay attention to their success. And you've heard me talk about our brain sees something negative in 20 second in 1/4 second and it takes 20 seconds to see a positive. So we are wired to see the negative. So we have to work hard to teach that brain. And also, again, this is about us modeling the behaviors. We're going to have to work harder too, right? And in terms of emotional regulation, as I talked about not accommodating, coping skills are essential for self regulation. If you don't have a way to cope with stress, I mean, just walking out in the door in the morning is going to be hard. And for those of us who have kids who really dysregulate very easily, and some of this could be, PNs, pandas, OCD, depression, whatever the reason is. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's bullying. I mean, there's so many reasons why kids don't have coping skills. It could be an organic issue. It could be inherited family behaviors, not inherited genetics, but inherited behaviors. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to foster coping skills. Okay, social self regulation. So when somebody is missing those skills in social, man, you got to really put the grease here and they need a lot of support. And one of the favorite things that I teach parents is role play. And role playing can be done in a variety of ways. So it can be done in social stories where and I'm a terrible drawer, where you're doing like stick figures or you're using some type of app like a Pictello, which makes a story, or Canva, and you're telling a social story and there's some level of back and forth interaction. Now, straight role play, that's social stories. Straight role play is actually acting things out. Like, wow, that was hard for you. Let me show you how to do it. Now, when you have a trusted relationship with your child, they're going to allow this to do this with you. When you don't, they're going to be defensive. You're not going to be able to get there. So you might have to start with social stories and move to role plays. But most kids, my experience has been they love role plays. It's mini acting. And you can even take that social story, that role play, it doesn't even have to be about them. It could be about somebody of a different gender in a very similar story. And when kids lack social skills, they often don't know that you're really trying to tell them about them and they absorb it. And you can literally see like the light bulb go off. I love that. Okay. Sensory self regulation. My number one tip for sensory self regulation is being proactive. I think when we know our kids have sensory issues and we don't try to proactively prevent dysregulation happening due to sensory overload, either under responsiveness or unmet needs, difficulty modulating sensory information, boy does this come back and bite us in the took us. So like your kid needs what we call like deep pressure or proprioceptive feedback in the joints, like before you go someplace that is a difficult place for them, maybe it's school. Maybe it's a birthday party. Maybe it's going out with their friends to the mall. You wanna have sensory activities in place, right? So maybe that's a trampoline. Maybe that is, a deep pressure, using a sensory scalp massager. I have one of those. Maybe it's taking a bath at night. Who knows what it is? You know, or you might need the help of somebody like me, and you can go to drroseanne.com/help to apply to be in our one-to-one program. It's a solution matcher that will guide you what you need. But you also can go to an occupational therapist. There are many ways to get support. So we talked about different ways to help children who are dysregulated, children and teens. There are many more. We're going to continue this conversation in this series. I even have a webinar that's part of this series. So make sure you sign up and stay tuned for that whatever time you're listening for it at this or watching right now, you are going to be able to get the webinar. And I hope I got you thinking about actionable ways to support your child's nervous system to take them from dysregulated to calm. And I hope you feel super empowered that you are your child's greatest advocate and support. And if you need more support, you can always go to drroseanne.com/help.